for all but one computer. If another participant is in a nearby office, close the doors between the offices. And please alert the commission if you are experiencing technology failure that prevents your participation at any time. Attorneys should contact staff at the previously provided contact information. The hearing today is for the purpose of taking evidence in this matter. And now I'll have entry of appearance of counsel, please, for the applicant.
Allison Honaker, Honaker Law Office. With me today is John Ryan, in-house counsel with Columbia Gas, Brittany Koenig, and Heather Temple,
Okay.
and Melissa Thompson.
Okay. And for the Attorney General.
Angela Good for the AG's office.
Okay. For KIUC.
Good morning, Kurt Bain for KIUC.
Morning. And for joint interveners.
Good morning, Matt Malone for IGS and Constellation New Energy Gas Division.
Got it. And for commission staff.
Good morning, Ashley Hatcher and Mariah Tussey.
Good morning. I am told that public notice has been given and filed into the record. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are there any outstanding motions? I believe there's several confidentiality motions.
I think that's the only.
So I understand that a settlement has been reached with the parties. Mr. Ryan, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The settlement and the supporting testimony were filed into the record on October 14th with a rata filed on October 17th. Did all parties sign on to the agreement? Has everyone signed? Could all the attorneys who participated, or if there's not an attorney for each entity, anyone who did participate on behalf of an entity in those negotiations and meetings, please rise and raise your right hand. Okay. So I'm just going to make sure that it sounds like the questions that a judge asked in a plea agreement to me, but just to make sure everybody understood, nobody was forced or coerced. Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the affirmments that you're about to give are true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. We'll go one at a time, answering the following questions, and I'll just go left to right. Were you aware of, and did you have an opportunity to participate in all of the negotiations that resulted in the settlement agreement?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Did you voluntarily sign the settlement agreement, and do you fully support each and every provision contained therein?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Chair.
Are there any provisions in the settlement agreement that you do not understand, object to, or take issue with?
There are none, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Chair.
Was any consideration of any kind offered, or were any promises made other than what is expressly set forth in the settlement agreement to induce you to negotiate and sign the settlement agreement?
No,
No, Your Honor.
no, Your Honor.
No, Chair.
Are you aware of any reason why the commission should not adopt and approve the settlement agreement in its entirety?
I'm not, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Chair.
Okay, you may be seated. Get that awkwardness out of the way. All right, we're moving on to the public comment portion. Anyone wishing to provide public comments may do so by following the instructions located on our website at psc.ky.gov. Written comments may always be submitted by sending an email to psc.comment@ky.gov. Let the record show that the instructions and link to provide public comments have been posted on the website for the past day. And counsel, I'm not aware of anyone who signed up to give public comment this morning. Anyone? No. Okay. That comments may always be submitted on the PSC's website at psc.ky.gov. Okay, we're moving on to the main event, the presentation of evidence. And counsel, at this time, please call your first witness.
We call Kimra Cole for this meeting.
Raise your right hand, please. Good morning. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
Do.
Please have a seat. And give us your full name, work address, and then let me know what you brought up there with you.
Yes.
To refer to.
Kimra Cole, Columbia Gas of Kentucky, 2001 Mercer Road, Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay. And what have you brought up to
I have a
reference?
binder that has my discovery responses and my testimony.
Okay. Counsel?
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your title with Columbia Gas of Kentucky?
I'm President and Chief Operating Officer for Columbia.
Corrections to make to any of those documents?
I do not.
If I were to ask you those same questions today, would your responses be the same?
Yes, they will.
And is it your desire and intent to incorporate those into the record of this proceeding today?
Yes, it is.
The witness is available for cross.
Did any of the other parties intend to cross-examine?
No.
No, Your Honor.
That's my- And that will be for all the witnesses. That was my understanding, just making sure.
Yes.
Okay. Staff.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
Good. So if there's a question I ask you that's better suited for another witness, just let me know, and just let me know what witness that would be.
Okay.
So I'm gonna kind of ask you some questions about your team review of the allocation of costs from NiSource to Columbia. Could you generally explain what NiSource costs, including the Columbia budget, you and your team review on a monthly basis?
Yes, our review of, financial review for Columbia Gas of Kentucky, it starts with a annual budget, the AFP. The plan is presented to the various state presidents. Myself, plan budget compared to, for the upcoming year compared to the current year. They also show what the plans are for increases in their budget, a explanation of those increases, decreases in their budget, and how they're allocating their various programs and the personnel in their budget to the different states. So that is an annual review that is in the fall prior to us approving the plan for the upcoming year. On a monthly basis, we call them, it's kind of funny names, but Day 5 report is the first numbers that come in on the 5th business day from the numbers from the prior month come in, and those are really operationally based. So my VP of Operations and his team, along with myself, get an opportunity at that point to look at what actually happened operationally in the state. It's kind of the work plan, what work was planned, what work got completed, where the variances are, where it's higher, lower, and so a complete analysis of the day-to-day operations and the financial impact happens on Day 5. Day 10 is the first report that I get that is really the first operating earnings report that shows me that are direct as well as allocated. And then that we go on from there to a Day 14. Day 14 is a very thorough review that includes from my staff, Judy Cooper, who's the Director of Regulatory, and Dawn Ayers, who's the Vice President of Operations. We're in a meeting along with functional representatives from across NiSource, and we do a complete review of everything from the prior month. We do a year-to-date, and we also review any PE adjustments that are being proposed to be made to the annual budget based upon any new information that has come in or any unexpected variances. So that opportunity, that discussion gives us the opportunity to challenge, to ask any questions, to get verification. Our questions, if they can't be answered in that meeting, are followed up upon, and then a final Day 14 report, or the monthly report, is then produced and distributed.
How often do you challenge the allocated costs?
There's been some verification that that what we think is being charged, and if there's something that looks out of line, that they'll go back and they'll, make sure that it's correct. In some cases, it isn't correct. Or I felt like we should handle this expense in a different way, and so I've made recommendations that I don't want that charge happening to Columbia, Kentucky. I want additional information, or I want to handle it in a different way to get the same item completed. So it's an ongoing dialogue, and conversations happen outside of that Day 14 meeting, but it is a formal meeting that gives us that opportunity, and everything's recorded.
Is there a stage in your review process where you look at line item expenses? Because I know you said the Day 10 report was for high-level expenses. Does that include the line item?
So when you say line item, there are a lot of expenses. So no, I do not review line items. There are groups within NiSource that do review, I say I don't review line items. I approve invoices as well as any other managers within the company approve invoices that would be looking at the actual line items, but I don't see the line item of everything that is charged to Columbia.
Is there anyone at Columbia who reviews the line items?
No, there is not. It would be, we're talking thousands of different expenses. It would be a very tedious role, and I'm not even sure that it would be feasible to review every single line item. Like the operational invoices come through, and every invoice has a different level of accountability, responsibility. So depending on the level that you are within the organization, it determines what level of a invoice or a charge that you can approve, or if it's above your level, then it kicks up.
What steps do you take to ensure that the NiSource employees testifying at this hearing are looking out for Columbia's interests and not NiSource interests?
You know, there's a level of trust there. I work with them closely. They're very responsive to any of my questions, my concerns. They bring items to my attention to make sure that, you know, I understand it and am okay with it. So there's just a ongoing two-way dialogue that's developed from trust for working with folks over many years.
I'm going to kind of switch topics a little bit. So I'm going to be looking at the response to staff's first data request, item 13. It's talking about Linda Rumpke, and it states her salary is excluded from the revenue requirement. However, in the supplemental staff's item 14 from the first request from 9/24/24, C for a hotel room. Can you explain why these items were included in the rate case expense itemization request if her activities were excluded from the revenue requirement?
I'm not sure, I don't have in front of me exactly what you're looking at. All of her expenses would, just her lobbying expenses would be excluded from the revenue requirement. Linda Rumpke does a number of different activities. She is as part of her role with Columbia Gas of Kentucky, and not just lobbying. Lobbying is just a portion of it, and so the amount of time and the expenses that she incurs while doing lobbying activities were excluded.
Do you know what percentage of her activities related directly to lobbying?
I don't, the compensation that where lobbying activities, I think that is the response in PSC 113. So you can see by month the amount of time that she spends, those are the lobbying activity expenses. So it's just it's a small piece of her role.
And next I'm looking at staff's first request, item 6, attachment B. Now this is not something that you sponsored, but it's about the NiSource allocations to Columbia. And there's a large section that the description for is consulting. What is your understanding of the definition of consulting?
So I don't have that in front of me.
Did you say item 6 for staff? May I approach?
Yes.
Okay, my definition of consulting, it would be where we've hired outside experts to assist us in a particular area, and looking at, on the first page of this attachment here, it looks like there's auditing, vegetation management. So we use consultants in a lot of different roles, whether it's for technical expertise, whether it's for operational efficiencies, whether it's for legal work or lobbying work or auditing work. I mean, we use consultants are, outside entities that are providing us with their expertise in a particular area.
Could you tell me who has the final say for allocated costs?
I have the final responsibility for Columbia Gas for everything for Columbia Gas of Kentucky.
And could you also tell me what Linda's role was as it relates to this rate case?
At the moment, she's helping provide lunch and coffee to the to the room back there, and here to provide any support should we need an extra set of hands or legs to go get something done.
Outside of the context of today, what was her role in the rate case?
She was following the rate case closely, so that we try to make sure that I've got a small staff and that we are cross-trained to be able to step in. So it's important for her to understand the regulatory process and understand more in depth Judy Cooper's role. And so she really has been a sounding board and also a more or less a trainee learning the details of the regulatory process.
I'm going to shift gears. I'm looking at staff's first request, item 11. In this request, Columbia was supposed to identify an allocation factor for each account, as well as the allocated amount. However, that was not provided. It was only the billed amount. NiSource did not obtain a cost of service study related to allocation. Could you explain why Columbia did not provide this information in response to this request?
I'm sorry, I don't have that request, and
May I approach this?
Yes.
would that be Tammy?
Nick Blye.
Nick Blye.
Commissioner Reagan?
Good morning, just a couple questions. The structure with NiSource, who directs the lobbying group? Does that come out of Columbia, Kentucky, or does that come from NiSource?
The local lobbying, where we use MMLK, is directed by myself and my team.
Okay.
We also have lobbying efforts in Washington on federal matters, and that is directed at the NiSource level in conjunction with the state presidents.
And when you're looking at your yearly plan, is that a directive that's sent down from NiSource, or do you develop the plans for Kentucky?
We develop the plans for Kentucky. We do look for where it makes sense to approach issues the same way across the states. And there's areas where that does, and there's areas where it doesn't, because the business climates are very different in each of the states that we operate.
And is any of your compensation tied to NiSource and how they perform or customer service?
Yes, the short-term incentive and the long-term incentive also both have components that are based on customer service, safety, financial performance of NiSource.
Is it evenly split between those, or is customer service weighted more heavily in compensation?
It varies from year to year, and on the long-term incentive, it's a 3-year program, so the goals change a little bit every year. So I don't know off the top of my head the split between, but I know that customer satisfaction and customer service and safety are good-sized components of it, but also the financial well-being of the company as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Stacy?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to just follow up on a question the staff had asked earlier about your consultants.
Yes.
How many consultants do you employ, would you think?
I don't know.
How many consultants do you think would you employ that are just not in service or day-to-day maintenance, or do you know that?
I don't. There are consultants for various different reasons. Some of them brought in for a very specific manner, and it's just a one-time, and others that are more ongoing, like in the case of auditing.
Well, in regard to that, then, what about the consultants that are just brought in for a particular purpose? Do you know about how many of those kinds of consultants there would be?
Bring them in. I don't have a purview of every single consultant, so I don't know.
Do you know what the cost on an annual basis is of all the consulting services that are provided to you?
I do not, but I believe that was a response to a data request. Yeah.
We can provide.
We can provide, happy to provide that. I do not know.
Could you just briefly describe your business relationship with NiSource?
My business relationship with NiSource?
Not yours individually, but between, your overall relationship with NiSource and how that works generally.
Well, Columbia Gas of Kentucky is one of 6 companies that are part of NiSource. We operate in 6 states. NiSource is the parent company. They also are where many of the centralized operations reside. We look at ways that we can do things to take advantage of the size of the corporation and where it makes sense for us to make decisions that benefit our customers because of our size. And then we also look at where there's differences and then how they can support Columbia of Kentucky and my team to support those differences, because it is the doing business in Maryland versus doing business in Kentucky it's a very different environment. NiSource looks at they have a larger footprint to look at, which provides us many opportunities to learn from the other states, to take advantage of opportunities that they've already encountered or challenges that they've already overcome, to learn from and to incorporate it here. And then there's a sharing of what we've done and what we've done well and what would have been challenges for us to share across the other states. So it's a day-to-day, very much functionally working relationship to make the best decisions for the customers in our state and the customers in the other states as well.
And how many of those partners are there?
There's a lot of partners. I mean, but because NiSource is a large centralized organization that's functionally organized, there's lots of interactions with lots of partners depending on the topic or the challenge at hand.
And is there in some way any charges that are charged back to Columbia from NiSource for any kind of a particular source of advice or help or operation?
Yeah, so NiSource, the parent company, doesn't have a revenue source. The states are the revenue source. So everything that the parent company does is charged back in some way to the states.
So everything they do for you is a charge.
Yes.
That's it, Chair.
And did you have a follow-up?
I did. Just to clarify, when we're talking about consultants, we have consultants and lobbying, correct? And MMLK is your lobbying firm?
Yes.
Okay. For last session and this session, how many lobbying firms does Columbia Gas use?
We only used MMLK.
You only use MMLK?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So whenever we have a potential rate increase for customers, one of the things that we tend to hear from public comments or just people who ask us out in the public, they want to know what the company did to try and cut expenses so that the rate increases don't have to just come from customers without knowing that the company has made some effort. So in your testimony, you talked about certain operational efficiencies that had been implemented to offset inflationary pressures. Could you tell us about some of those?
Yes. We work very hard to try to keep our costs down for our customers. Customer affordability is very important to us. So we're working to maintain as much as possible flat O&M, and that means that we've got to absorb inflationary costs, merit increases, and everything else. So in order to be able to do that, we've had to find efficiencies. We've had numerous different efforts and projects throughout the years. One of the most current ones right now, it's called Apollo. And Apollo has looked at what are some of our key cost drivers. And it's assigned a lead and then a supporting team represented from all the various states to look at those initiatives and to see, okay, well, why is it a cost driver? Where is it possible to get more savings? Can we have a better relationship with a contractor that saves us money? Are there changes in the process that we can make? And we've been very successful in doing that. We've done that as far as the way that we have handled our locating process, handled our flagging process. We've made many changes in the layout of those processes that have resulted in savings that have allowed us to offset other increases or to get more work done. So the flagging, for example, in the flagging process, it was in our contracts that the contractor would send flaggers out. And so we took a hard look at, well, when do we really need flaggers? When are they necessary? If you're on a cul-de-sac, do you really need flaggers? Can we save some costs there? We also moved, instead of the contractors bringing their own flaggers, that we go directly and hire the flaggers and determine when they're needed, which saved money because then we weren't getting the markup from the contractors. So that's one example of when we looked really hard at it, we were able to find process changes within our operation that allowed us to get things done more efficiently, more effectively, and at a lower cost.
So now the average residential customer is going to see a 4.7% increase under the settlement terms. Does that sound right?
I don't know the exact number. I would ask Judy Cooper to be the witness on that.
The settlement added $50,000 for low-income subsidies. Where does that money come from? Is that from the NiSource Charitable Foundation?
No, that will be from shareholders.
Okay, so directly.
So that is outside of our NiSource Foundation contributions.
NiSource Charitable Foundation is also funded from shareholder contributions?
Yes, it is.
though? Okay, but this would be separate?
This
not
would be,
through the charitable
this,
service.
yeah, there's certain restrictions of how we can spend foundation dollars, and the $50,000 would be outside of those restrictions, so that's why it's a separate pool.
There's also an enhanced education effort, according to your testimony, to educate customers about what other assistance programs are available, like Blye.
Yes.
What have you done to enhance the education?
We've worked really closely, we talked about Linda Rumpke, she's worked really closely with the Energy Cabinet and making sure that any new dollars that are coming in, that our customers are set up to hook up with them. We've got customer outreach programs. We've got our customer care line that is very much aware of the programs to make sure that we put our customers in contact with the resources that can help them. We do all kinds of outreach as far as public service announcements, taking advantage of our public affairs department to make sure that our communities, our community leaders are aware so that they can make their constituents aware as well.
Do you track how much assistance your customers are using?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Is there a way to see whether the bills were paid with their funds or from Blye?
I don't know the answer to that question. Judy Cooper may know the answer to that question.
Or where it's being used, like which parts of your service areas, or like when it's being used. Do you know if that's being tracked?
I don't, but
Okay.
that information may be available.
Mm-hmm. And same thing like with the 50,000 that's being contributed. Do you know if Columbia intends to track whether all that's used, and where and when?
I don't know.
Okay. Just curious if that's.
Yeah, I'm not sure of
if
the
that's
tracking
enough.
coming back from the agencies to us on that, so.
So you've been contributing 20-something thousand, 21,000, 27,000, something like that a year. Was it all getting used?
As far as I know.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. Do we have follow-up from staff?
Yes, I have one follow-up. You talked about trying to keep the O&M flat, but this year there appears to be an increase in O&M from the 2021 rate case. Could you explain if you would still consider that flat and what you mean by that?
So, directionally, it is pretty flat. We took on the initiative to keep O&M flat starting last year. And it is flat when you look over what we asked for in our 21 case, not what we were actually provided in settlement. But we are actually down from what our ask was in 21 for O&M.
Yeah, that's the only question I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any follow-up from the other commissioners? All right.
I have one redirect question.
Oh, sorry, redirect.
Do you recall getting some questions about the allocations and how many times you challenge or what you do? Can you give us some examples of times that you have challenged lately and what the outcome of those were?
Yeah, a current example, I mentioned the Project Apollo. Part of Apollo is we provided people that were experts in fields to go be part of that team. And they, the team had taken money from my budget to follow that employee to go do that. And I argued that, no, I needed that money back because that person was doing a vital role in Kentucky and I needed to backfill it. So I was able to get the money put back into my budget. Another would be, we talked a little bit about consultants. There was a charge, they wanted to hire a tax consultant for the issue that has been brought up as part of this case through property, the change in the classification of property tax. And I asked them not to hire a consultant, that we wanted to work through the legislative process here to see if we could get it addressed, rather than to hire a consultant and then the consultant, pay the consultant and for them to get a portion of that back. So those would be two examples. Another would be There's an AMI project, an automated meter reading project that is going on in the other states, in some of the other states. It's a project that we have not yet decided if we're moving forward with. We're still studying it for Kentucky. And I, did verification to make sure that the team that was working on that none of those costs were allocated to Kentucky, because it's not an active project this year in our state, nor should it be in the test year. So verified that, that we were not being allocated those charges. So those are a couple off the top of my head. But it's an ongoing dialogue just to make sure when I hear of a project that's going on in another state that we're currently not active in, I verify just to make sure that Columbia of Kentucky is not being allocated those charges.
Okay. Nothing further.
Okay. You may step down, and I think maybe we would want you to stick around though.
I was getting ready to ask if she could excuse.
Just the key witnesses, I'll probably, just to make sure we get everything covered. And we didn't really talk about scheduling, but I would like to get done today. I don't want to be here midnight. If we're going to be here midnight, probably not going to do that, but to the extent that we can, I would like to try and get through these 10 or so witnesses that we need to get through today. I probably won't call frequent breaks, but if anybody needs a break, by all means, you are not my prisoner. Indicate in some way between witnesses that we need a break, and we'll do that. So, call your next witnesses.
We'll call Judy Cooper.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please have a seat. Tell us your full name, your business address, and if materials are different from the previous witness, let us know.
Okay. My name's Judy Cooper. My business address is 2001 Mercer Road, Lexington, Kentucky,
Okay.
40511.
And you have the same materials that Ms. Cole had?
I do not. I have my errata testimony in support of the settlement and a copy of the joint stipulation and settlement agreement.
Okay. Everyone's waving across except staff.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning. Fine. How are you?
Good. So I'm first going to be looking at Columbia, Kentucky's response to staff's second request, item 10. This was co-sponsored by you and Mr. Rhea. On the
Okay.
second page, it states, in today's world of varied options for energy supply decision-making, the innovations that empower these decisions, bypass can have a more expansive meaning. Could you explain what other means of bypass Columbia would consider a possibility for its customers outside of the traditional definition of receiving natural gas from an interstate pipeline directly?
I don't have a copy of that in front of me. I don't know if
May I approach?
I can.
You may approach.
Okay, so this is staff's question 2, number 10. And it's asking about Mr. Ray's testimony regarding transportation customers and their distance from the nearest interstate pipeline. And the response of Mr. Ray and myself was that, as you were asking me, bypass should not be limited to the traditional definition, which was the distance from an interstate pipeline, that a large customer could bypass, meaning leave a distribution system and connect directly with an interstate pipeline. That's the traditional meaning of bypass. In today's world, the varied options for energy supply decision-making, a customer that has the size that could bypass could convert, they could electrify, they could install solar panels, they could use some of their own industrial processes that generate the capability for fueling their operations without natural gas. Those are a few of the other options that would be available. Look into the future, there could be other means, but those are a few that immediately come to mind.
And has Columbia experienced a customer within the last 10 years leaving its service due to traditional bypass?
In the last, what period of time did you say?
10 years?
10 years?
Yes.
So we have had, due to traditional bypass. So, in part of our service area, there is basically LDC competition, meaning we are an incumbent supplier, and they're in part of our service area, there are other alternate suppliers. So I can't remember I don't know exactly the time period, because I'm really not good at remembering time period. So I don't know if it's been within the last 10 years. I'm going to think it has. But we have lost some load to alternate providers. And that's any other particular instances I'm not certain about.
Do you have like an estimate of how many customers you would have lost?
There's one that I'm thinking of, load, that we lost. We've lost some other customers due to business circumstances. They've ceased operations.
Okay.
So I don't think that falls within the same category.
When you say load, do you mean residential, commercial, or industrial load?
Industrial.
Industrial. Okay. And then I want to ask you the same question related to non-traditional bypass. Have you lost any customers due to that?
Due to non-traditional bypass, to date, as of right now, I don't know. I don't know.
You think there's someone that would know the answer to that?
I think we could find out.
Okay, so maybe
Yes.
as opposed to your data request, could we ask that question?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely. Be
thank you
glad
so
to
much.
provide that.
Okay. And the customer that you were talking about who utilized traditional bypass, what steps did Columbia take at that time to attempt to keep their service, if you know?
So, it was, what steps did we take to, the customer that I have in mind has now dual, meaning more than one provider, and so they can elect as part of their operations who they are taking gas supply from. And they may take from both at the same time. They make that decision. We're no longer the only provider to that entity. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Now I'm kind of going to switch gears and kind of go into a different line of questioning.
Okay.
This is going to be related to the blanket certificate of limited jurisdiction. Has Columbia been contracted by current or potential customers regarding the delivery of renewable natural gas?
We do not have any signed contracts for any renewable natural gas,
Okay. Is their contract being negotiated right now?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Can you explain whether Columbia is aware of any facilities capable of producing renewable natural gas that already has pipelines capable of connecting or already connected to Columbia's existing pipelines?
Not that I'm aware of.
Would Columbia in the future be purchasing the renewable natural gas for retail customer heating, cooking, or other commercial purposes?
So if Columbia were to do that in the future, the orders from the commission in our quarterly gas cost adjustments have for, I don't know, a good year, maybe two, I don't know exactly the period of time, but they have required us to disclose that if we have any. And to date, we do not have any renewable natural gas into our system for system supply. The purpose of the blanket certificate filing at FERC, at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, would be for us to transport gas, not for system supply.
Okay. Okay. Do you know the approximate volume of renewable natural gas Columbia believes may be necessary to make the business case for Columbia to invest in the facilities necessary to make local renewable natural gas?
Could you ask that again, please?
Sure. Could you provide the approximate volume of renewable natural gas Columbia believes may be necessary to make the business case for Columbia to invest in the facilities necessary to make local renewable natural gas?
I'm sorry, I have no idea. I would think it would be very dependent, situationally dependent.
But basically, at the current point, it is only going to be transport of natural gas in the future. That was the purpose of the certificate?
That's correct, for third parties.
Okay. And that is that line of questioning. Let's see. Sorry, I have several pages here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to be asking you some questions related to the late payment fee.
Okay.
Could you explain to me the original purpose for the late payment fee for residential customers since its approval in case number 2009-00141?
So the original purpose was to provide an incentive for residential customers to pay on time. Most consumer bills of any type have a late payment charge if the bill is not paid on time, and so it was a similar inducement to encourage customers to pay on time.
Do you think that that late payment fee has acted as intended?
I think so.
If you believe it's acted as intended, what's the purpose of removing the late payment fee?
The commission's order in our last case, our last rate case, 2021-00183, indicated, asked for cost support as part of the discovery in that case, and indicated that that commission at that time viewed the late payment penalty as a recurring charge and should be cost-based. That was never the intent. We provided the cost information the commission asked for in the last case. The commission allowed it to continue in the last case, but we got the clear message that from that commission, they didn't think a 5% residential late payment fee was appropriate.
And are there any other costs of the late payment fee outside of the commission's last order?
I don't know, we haven't looked to refresh those. I will say, just as a means of comparison, on my Lexington city service bill, which is for sewer and garbage collection, there's a 10% late payment fee. So I think it's a pretty routine consumer charge that people are accustomed to, but that's just a example.
And does the late payment fee as it stands help Columbia, Kentucky pay the administrative costs associated with late payments?
It does go, yes, it does go to offset the revenue requirement.
Does the removal of the fee result in any sort of cost savings for Columbia, Kentucky or its customers?
No cost savings. It would be a savings, I guess, for customers who pay late, but that cost is spread over all of the customer base. So customers that are paying late, with the removal, they wouldn't pay it any longer. Technically, that would be a savings and might help people who are having trouble paying their bills, but it doesn't reduce any cost to the company.
And as it stands, are there late payment expenses embedded in the reconnect charge?
The reconnect charge is a cost-based charge, and it's based on trip expense to go out and send a truck and a service tech out to perform the work that's required on the premise.
Thank you. And I'm going to kind of go into the allocation review process. I'm looking at staff's third request, item 27, regarding the review of costs allocated to Columbia, Kentucky. Can you explain what, if any, changes have been made to this review process following Columbia, Kentucky's last rate case?
May I get a?
Yes. It's
a look
about
at-
the review of like the allocated costs, similar to what Ms. Cole
Is
was
that-
talking about.
She described it accurately. I participate in those day 14 reviews, just as she described. I assume that's what that question is.
Oh, it's about, has that review process changed since the last rate case?
Dramatically, yes,
Okay.
just as she described, because that all went in place subsequent to the last rate case.
Could you describe briefly what the review process was before the last rate case?
It was far more limited and less rigorous. We have been able to obtain this periodic scheduled reporting and review, and the dynamics of the questioning and the responses and the action, the follow-up actions it's night and day, I would say. And also in the planning process that we're involved, as Ms. Cole said, in the planning process, that we get insight into that and we can ask questions, and she gave some really some accurate examples.
Now I'm going to be looking at staff's fourth request, item 1, attachment A. And this is an exhibit you did not sponsor, but I have general questions about if this information is provided in the allocation review process. But if you do think that the questions would be more appropriate to the witness who sponsored it, just let me know.
Okay.
And you said item 1, attachment A?
Yes. Okay. For
Yeah,
staff's fourth request. And this relates to there's a variety of costs that were reclassified and also reallocated. I was wondering who within Columbia, Kentucky would have been responsible for reviewing the invoices for the costs that were misclassified.
So I need to figure out exactly what this is that I'm looking at.
Oh, sure.
Can you show me, like,
May I approach?
what the question?
Yes.
I just see the attachment and I don't know what the question was. One A, okay.
Do you need the question again or rephrasing?
Yes, please.
Okay. I was wondering who at Columbia, Kentucky is responsible for reviewing the items that are in this attachment that have been reclassified.
Oh, can I touch that? This works about as well as my phone. Or I work about as this one. Who is responsible for having gone through all of these? That would be Tammy Schaefer, in consultation with Kimra, myself. Some of these items, Linda Rumpke was mentioned, so just depending on the nature of the expense and where it came from, Tammy would reach out to us or the approver. She was charged with going through and reviewing these, and then she reaches out to the appropriate approver or to us, sometimes both, so we can go back and look and say, yes, that's wrong, no, that's not. Just figure it out.
Okay, and would it be the
Correct
same
it.
answer for the misallocated costs as the reclassified costs?
For the misallocated, as opposed to the direct, is that what?
There were costs that were misallocated, and then there were costs that were misclassified. So my first question was related to the misclassified costs, but now I'm kind of talking about the misbilled and misallocated costs.
Tammy would have been involved in all of those. There may have been others looking at the allocated cost.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you this, I'm not sure if you will know the answer or not, but it looks like a majority of the misallocations and misclassifications occurred in January and February 2024. Do you have an explanation for this?
I see that, what you're saying on here, but no, I don't know why. I don't have an explanation.
Do you know if
Sorry.
someone else might be better to answer that?
I guess, ask Ms. Schaefer,
Okay,
Tammy
Ms.
Schaefer. I don't know for sure, but I would start there.
Okay. And do you believe that these are costs that would be caught in the review process?
Caught in the review process, I'm sorry, can you?
Sure. Like the review process that Ms. Cole talked about
Mhm.
kind of looks through all the different expenses. Would these have been costs that would have been looked at as part of the review process?
So the review process is probably at a higher level in those day 14 meetings.
Mhm.
If they were if these things were falling within the budgets and they didn't kick out as being a variance from the budget, then they probably would not have been identified in that day 14 meeting. So that's why in preparation for a rate case, in particular, you have to go in and dig deeper and look at each individual expense to identify what is eligible for recovery from ratepayers and what is not.
And do you happen to know if Columbia changed anything about the review internally, even if it's not the review process, just if there's an additional person to look at these following the discovery of these errors?
Did we change anything about the review process following the discovery of these errors, so since February?
Yes.
I don't know.
Is there anyone who would know?
I would point you to Ms. Schaefer, to
Okay,
Tammy.
thank you
please.
so much. Now I just have a few miscellaneous questions. How many of Columbia, Kentucky's employees work outside of Kentucky?
How many of Columbia Gas of Kentucky's employees? I don't know. I want to say an answer, but I don't know, so I shouldn't.
Do you think, is there someone you think would be better to answer, or do you think a post-hearing data request would be more appropriate?
A post-hearing data request.
Yeah, I will
I
ask that
think.
as a post-hearing data
Yes.
request. How
Thank
many
you.
Columbia, Kentucky's employees work outside of Kentucky?
Mhm.
And if so, how many and what locations they would be working?
Okay.
And I'm now going to look at the September update for the reimbursement paperwork. It looks like the company bills at .67 a mile for travel. Could you explain why that bill is so, like, could you kind of explain what goes into that calculation?
The company bills at
67 cents a mile for travel. Like reimbursement, travel reimbursement. It reimburses at 67 cents.
I think that's the IRS mileage rate.
I think the IRS is more like 43 cents. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
I think the latest that I saw IRS is like 43 cents.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you explain the?
I don't know, no.
Do you know if somebody would know the answer to that?
I don't know that there's anyone here
Okay.
that would know, but if you'd like to
That's
ask
the
us
post-hearing data
for a
report.
post-hearing data request.
That sounds good.
67.
Perfect.
And
And we get,
Nope. They just raised it like within the last year or so, but yeah.
And I have my last question for you. In case number 2021-183, the commission stated that the O&M expense level calculated by NiSource was higher than similarly situated utilities. Could you provide what steps Columbia, Kentucky has taken to address this concern? Is there anything outside the review process, for example?
As Ms. Cole said, we have undertaken a lot of steps to maintain flat O&M and draw out efficiencies and work better trying to be able to have the least best cost for our customers and trying to draw out those efficiencies. So improving the work that we do, as Ms. Cole described.
I know Ms. Cole talked about how she was more looking at what Columbia asked for rather than what was granted in the last rate case. Could you explain why you would look more at the ask rather than the actual amount?
Could you ask me that again?
Oh, sure.
Please.
So Ms. Cole talked about how when you're looking at flat O&M, you're looking more at what Columbia had originally asked for in the rate case rather than the settled upon amount. Could you explain why it was that amount she was looking at rather than the settlement amount to maintain flat O&M?
So I think she said that the flat O&M was compared to the, I think she said it was compared to 2023, and the forecasted test year was 2022 in the 2021 rate case. And so she was comparing the commitment of flat O&M, which means flat for NiSource and for each operating company, but there could be ups and downs within each operating company's budget as well.
And now I apologize if that was a misunderstanding on my part.
That's what I think I heard her say.
Okay. Yeah. And that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm just going over your updated testimony, and I have a couple questions
Okay.
on pension, long-term, short-term incentives.
Okay.
Does Columbia Gas have the rule of 75 for retirement, meaning years of service plus age?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't looked into it.
Okay. At the, under the short-term incentive, it says short-term incentive compensation and profit sharing. Is it both or one of the other in the short term? Do you know?
I think that would be better asked to Beth Owens,
Okay.
and she will be able to answer that.
On all those questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I have one more question. You may not be able to answer this, so
Okay.
just tell me.
Sorry.
From an operational standpoint, can the different companies talk to each other from an IT perspective? Do you know? Do your systems talk to each other and to NiSource, or are there 6 or 7 different IT arrangements?
So, just very generally, I'm not an IT expert by any means, but generally the Columbia companies, so Columbia Gas of Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Ohio, are on the same platforms, if that's the right word, and systems.
Okay.
Indiana is on a different platform. Ultimately, the goal is at some point for us all to come together, and as systems are modernized, then the cost can be spread amongst all the states. And that should be beneficial for customers because of the quantity that you'd be able to,
Save
you're a
by-
larger, right,
Yeah, by consolidation.
right.
So NiSource as the parent has a different platform than the other 6.
NiSource as the parent. So when I say platforms, I'm thinking about like how we get work done, how we communicate with the field to get work done, our customer information systems. And those are the same for the Columbia companies, but NIPSCO, which is the Indiana operating company, their systems are different.
Okay. So there is,
NiSource itself doesn't have, they're not an operating company.
Okay.
They're a holding company.
so there is a plan to look at that down the line to combine the platforms to
Long-term.
pass those savings
Yes,
long-term?
Yes, yes. I think our witness, Greg Skinner, alluded to that or maybe have mentioned that in his testimony, but there's nothing in that area in our application this time. And figuring out what that might be, I think is still to come.
Long-term?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stacy?
Yes, Ms. Cooper, I want to go back to your comments about renewable gas.
Okay.
Your answer was that you didn't have any renewable gas that was for sale to your customers, to your regular customers, is that correct?
We do not purchase any as part of our system supply. That is what we sell to our customers. That's correct.
Okay. Do you purchase any for any other sale or any?
No,
other-
sir.
Have you in the past?
No, sir.
Can you tell me exactly what a transportable gas is?
So, transportation gas would be gas that is injected into our system, and we simply deliver it to a customer that's on our system. And we don't buy that gas and resell it. The customer would purchase their own, they would take title to the gas themselves. We just merely transport it and run it through our system, like it was in a box from the upstream.
Okay.
Or maybe I should say Amazon these days, I don't know.
Can you tell me what is considered a renewable gas?
I think there are probably a lot of different ways that renewable gas can be manufactured, or it comes out of biofuels, garbage places can produce a renewable natural gas. There are, within the industry, there's discussion about certifications and something being certified as renewable natural gas, whether, I guess it's maybe a widely used term, and some try to really hone in on the attributes that would certify, or there should be attributes to certify something as renewable natural gas. We have not made that distinction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go back to one of the questions that Ms. Cole said you might be able to answer.
Okay.
I was asking about whether there's any tracking done for the low-income assistance, how much is used, where, and when. Do you know?
We do know customers that receive low-income energy assistance, and we know how much that is received. I don't think we currently track the location. I mean, we know the customers that receive it, and we know their premise, so you would think that we could, you would think that we could extract that and determine the locations. I just don't, we haven't done that.
Okay.
But we do know the dollars that come in. I think there might have been a data request about some of that.
Okay.
The dollar amount
So
anyway.
you could look at when and where are we getting these requests. Like I assume it's January and July, but, and we could make certain assumptions about which counties are using more. But if you wanted to, that'd be fairly easy to track down.
Certainly the amount, so low-income assistance often comes in as a pledge from the external agency. It can come from churches a lot of times. It can come from local governments. It can come from numerous different places. And so the pledges come in, certainly they're more in the heating season in the winter months, but they come in year-round. Honestly, they can. And so we receive a pledge from an agency that they're going to provide assistance to a customer. And when the pledge comes in, it's noted on their account. And so there's no further collection activity for that amount once it's pledged. The receipt of the funds sometimes occurs, several months later. But that doesn't change the pledge to the customer. So we know that money's coming in. Doesn't mean it comes today, it does not mean it comes in the same month that we received the pledge, but it does come in. So I'm not sure if what we would have would be the pledge or the receipt of the assistance dollars, but we do know the amount that is attributed to a customer.
And now with the additional 50,000 that will be contributed from your shareholders to the low-income assistance, do you have plans to track that, to see where it's needed and when? Because that won't be a pledge, that'll come directly from your shareholders.
It will be directly from our shareholders, and it will be remitted to the receiving agency, and then they will determine where it goes.
Oh, who's the receiving agency?
We haven't explicitly said that, but we were talking about winter care. So that's the Community Action Council.
Okay.
That's
and does that operate throughout your entire service territory?
Yes.
Winter Care does?
Yes, they do.
Okay. as I travel across the country at different conferences, there's been some talk of applying assistance more toward helping customers have better energy efficiency or better insulation, things like that, so that rather than giving them assistance month after month, a one-time expense might be used more efficiently than to just continue to help pay bills and lower the bills
Yes.
instead. Has there been any talk at Columbia of ways to help individual customers with energy efficiency and home updates?
So, to the commitment in the stipulation for the $50,000, as a part of the stipulation, the contribution by the shareholders was to low-income energy assistance, and there was, that was the agreement of the parties. So, no further definition about that, except we kind of generally called it winter care. And so that's the commitment of the parties in the stipulation. As far as other weatherization kind of assistance, Columbia currently offers a low-income furnace replacement program, which is our one demand-side management program that we have remaining. And it provides a low-income qualifying residents with replacement of their natural gas furnace. If it is limping along, it's inefficient, it needs to be replaced. Again, that's done by the Community Action Council. They have to identify the possible recipients. So that is, I don't know if that exactly falls within your definition of weatherization, but it certainly is helpful to the recipients because they're getting a much more efficient furnace than what's being replaced, what we're replacing.
And they would apply for that through the Community Action Council
Yes,
rather than
that's
through
correct.
Columbia directly.
Yes,
I think of it as like, instead of giving more, giving smarter.
yes.
Like to prevent the need for light heat and things like
Right.
that in the future.
Understand.
And then I think I had asked Ms. Cole what the average residential customer would now, what increase they would see. Under the original proposal, it would be about $7.28 per bill. Do you know what it is now?
The value of the stipulation and the settlement is a reduction of $4.04
Okay.
from Columbia's
So
proposal.
$3.24 or so would be the average increase now. Does that sound right?
The average increase as proposed, it depends on what you compare it to.
Okay.
But that is, that 4.71% compares to the 10 point,
Right.
sorry, let me check my testimony, 10.7, 10.7, yes, thank you.
Yeah, but so the dollar amount though,
The-
we subtract $4.04 from the $7.28, which was the original.
Right, so if you subtract that, but then that would give you the current base rate increase.
I have violated my policy of not doing math while people watch me. All right. In your testimony, there was reference to the Tax Act Adjustment Factor Tariff.
Yes, ma'am.
And in part of the settlement, Columbia Gas was going to withdraw their proposal for a Tax Act Adjustment Factor Tariff.
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you describe what that would have been? What was that?
It was withdrawn as part of the settlement agreement. What Columbia proposed originally and withdrew in settlement was a sort of reincarnation of a previous federal tax adjustment factor tariff. the proposal was that it would be a state tax adjustment factor specifically for the recent change by the Department of Revenue in the assessment of pipelines as personal property versus what has always in the past been real property. There was a change that occurred because of action of a non-utility party. And it was raised then the result was pipelines that historically had been treated as real property, I always get these confused, real property were to be billed as personal property. The tax rate for real property is like 11 cents. The tax rate for personal property is 45 cents per $100 of valuation. So the difference between 11 point something it was and 45 cents was the increase that would have been a part of Columbia's forecasted test year for 2025, except the General Assembly enacted, was that this year? Yeah, I guess it was, a 2-year temporary return from, this is getting confusing, enacted a 2-year suspension. So tax years 24 and 25, the revenue cabinet assessment is back at the lower real property rate. If the General Assembly does not act in the upcoming session in January 2025, or 2025 General Assembly, then if they do not act to permanently change or extend the current 2-year exemption, then beginning in 2026, the property tax valuation will increase for all utilities with pipelines. So it's not just Columbia Gas of Kentucky, from 11 cents, 11.4 I think it is, to 45 cents per $100 of valuation. So that tariff that we put in place was to be able to come back to the commission with an application to say, this is what the General Assembly has done or has the effect of them not doing something, provides this increase in property tax in 2026. Obviously not part of our recovery in this case because we put this tax in at the property tax in at the lower assessment per 100, so 11 cents. We'd have to come back to the commission, show that change, and the commission would then review it and consider, but it would allow just for a increase only for that tax if it were to occur.
So the stay-out provision agreed to in the settlement is for
Yes.
2.5 years.
Yes.
If this happens in 26, if the General Assembly doesn't act, you would anticipate that you'd have to come back and ask for something in between, or that you'd wait for the 2.5 years?
I don't know. We'd have to see what happens at the time. The stay-out provision could, I think, allow the opportunity for Columbia to come back, but I don't know, sitting here today, whether we would or not.
Okay.
We are working with the General Assembly at the Energy Committee meeting. Today's Monday. I think it was last Wednesday. This was on the agenda and it was discussed. So we're hopeful that there will be action taken in the 2025 session.
Okay. Go back and watch that one. And then There was also an agreement in the stipulation to reduce the supplier's discount in the choice program. What does that mean? What was that? What was the supplier's discount?
So the supplier's discount is one of the terms of the customer choice program. And the supplier discount is the, Columbia purchases the accounts receivables, so we do the billing for the suppliers. Originally, when the choice program started and the terms were negotiated at that time, that discount was 2.5%. A few years ago, and I should be able to quote the year, but I can't remember. It wasn't recent history. It's been some time back when the choice program and some of those terms were part of another rate case, and a rate case settlement. We agreed to reduce it from 2.5% to 2%, and the stipulation this time would reduce it from 2% to 1.75%, which means when Columbia collects the rates that are billed for a supplier to the customers, then we would remit back to the supplier 97.75%. 97.25%. I gotta do math.
In public.
Yeah, in public.
On the stand.
I know, on the stand. It should, it would be in the tariff, though. I know where to check this number.
I didn't do myself already incorrectly. And this was the joint interveners that are Mr. Long's customers, the choice program. And this was negotiated.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And did I stop you in the middle of your math? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was gonna check the tariff because it would be in the tariff. If I find the right page. Sorry, I have a difficult time flipping the pages. I figured. Oh, yes, because we had to move it to a new page. Yes, the 98.25%.
Also, the stipulation changed the value for cash working capital. It had been proposed at 0, and now it's a negative amount. What is the negative amount? I didn't see it.
What is the negative amount? It is, I believe, on attachment A, the stipulation. The line, attachment A of the stipulation, line 7, the reduction to reflect the removal of cash working capital from rate base as agreed to in the settlement is $851,000.
And that was a result of the lead lag study that was performed.
Yes, ma'am.
Moving on to the corporate aircraft provision of the stipulation. I know that the Attorney General's office had recommended a reduction. What is the practical effect of the reduction that took place? Is it now reduced to the amount that would have been paid if commercial airlines had been used? Or just, if you can, explain to me how the corporate aircraft expense was reduced.
Okay, so the way it's shown on attachment A to the stipulation, which I don't know if you have that in front of you or not, but the AG's proposed adjustment is in the left-hand column, $252,000 for corporate aviation, yes. And this, the result of the negotiation and the stipulation of the parties, that amount is not removed. It remains, so the adjustment of the Attorney General was agreed upon to be not retained in the settlement. The corporate aircraft is used by our CEO and CFO primarily for investor contacts, to visit with existing investors and potential new investors to secure capital for the company. And it's also used by a lot of corporate service employees, but operating companies employees as well, from a central location to go, and they do a number of best practices kind of visits with peer companies, and it saves time and money that would otherwise have been spent on commercial aircraft tickets for all of those people that are performing those best practice visits to try to help to find ways to reduce cost, do things more efficiently, and ultimately provide a savings for our customers.
So was the reduction just a compromise amount, or was it based on analyzing what it would have cost for the commercial airline tickets?
As a part of the stipulation, the amount was agreed upon that it was $252,000. So how each individual party may have viewed that was their own negotiation.
Okay. And part of that travel was for investor relations. We also had in the stipulation agreement to reduce the investor relations expenses. Could you give me an example of what investor relation expenses are and how they were reduced?
So those investor relation expenses are retained as part of the revenue requirement. They are still included in the revenue requirement. That's basically the cost of, I believe it's 2 employees whose sole function it is to provide the investor relation materials and support the relationships with investors, again, to secure capital, and those relationships and knowing the company through these investor relations folks helps to de-risk the company, because the investors, when they have a contact and somebody to talk to and they can understand our business, then they are more willing to offer commitments for capital without a higher risk premium that might be associated with an entity they don't know as well.
Okay, so the investor relations expenses includes the salary for those 2 employees?
Yes, and their
The sole job it is
expenses.
to create
Yes.
that relationship, okay. And answer the questions. All right. And then rate case expense was decreased by amortizing over 3 years instead of 1.
That's
But then
correct.
also, did the stipulation decrease the expense, I guess expenses were decreased because of the stipulation?
Yes,
Or
ma'am.
expected to
Yes,
decrease?
that's correct.
I don't know how long we ask questions today, I guess.
Well, there are some witnesses who were dismissed, and that was certainly a savings, so they didn't have to. We saved there.
And then in the rate design, the customer charge was $19.75 a month. and now it's gonna be $21.25.
That's correct.
So we had a $1.50 increase in the customer charge.
That's correct.
Okay. That might be all the questions, I think that's all the questions I have. Do we have follow-up from staff,
No, Your Honor.
commissioners?
Nope.
No.
And reader it?
I have one.
Okay.
Do you remember the questions that were getting asked by the chair on the $50,000 that was gonna be for the low income, the winter care?
Yes,
Is it just a one-time 50,000 in the stipulation and settlement agreement?
it's one time in 2024, another time, another 50,000 in 2025, and a third 50,000 in 2026.
And then, do you wish to incorporate all of your testimony and data requests into the record of this proceeding today?
Yes.
Nothing further?
All right. Again, I will probably not excuse this particular witness. Just the lead ones. I would like to stick around in case we have more questions that other people can't answer, but you
Okay.
definitely may leave the witness.
Okay, thank you.
And I've had a request for a break. I am going to leave it, limit it to just like 10 minutes. I'm going to be back in 10 minutes. We're off the record? raise your right hand to be sworn, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right, you may be seated. Please tell us your full name and your business address.
Donald P. Ayers.
Okay. And what materials have you brought with you?
I brought my testimony and responses.
Okay. And we may need you to speak up a little bit or sit closer to the mic.
Okay.
Okay, counsel?
And what is your title with Columbia Gas of Kentucky?
I'm Vice President of Operations.
And did you cause testimony and some responses today to request to be filed in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any additions or corrections to make to any of those documents?
I do not.
If I were to ask you those same questions today, would your responses be the same?
Yes, they would.
And is it your desire and intent to incorporate those into the record of this proceeding?
It is.
The witness is available for cross.
Thank you. Counsel?
Mr. Ayers, if you can't hear me for any reason, just let me know and I'll try to repeat myself. I believe that a lot of your testimony was related to the distribution integrity, I'm sorry, I don't want to get it wrong, management program?
Yes.
Okay, so, based on the information that you provided in your testimony and in response to one of the later data requests, what is, in your view, the top 5 highest ranked risks?
So the top 5 in order are damages excavator error, failure to report, crossbores, failure to notify, and damage locator error.
Okay. And based on your, I think it was one of your responses to the data request, you all provided Columbia's DEMP plan. But when asked about Columbia, Kentucky's in particular, you provided some bullet points. Is that correct?
I think we added the appendix in the back.
Okay. With regard to all the subsidiaries of NiSource, is the way that that program works similar in nature?
Yes.
Okay. Then back to the actual plan itself, what are the performance measures that you all use with regard to that plan?
Yeah, there's a whole list of them in there, quite a few.
Okay. Top 3?
I don't know that these are top 3. I'll throw out 3 that I think are important. Number of leaks, number of damages, and then monitoring excavation damage.
Okay. And I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. I know that you all have got a pipeline replacement program in place, and it has not progressed as initially proposed, correct?
Correct.
So can you explain a little bit about the delay in the progression in that plan?
Yeah, so as I understand it, when we went into the rate case in 2021, we were slightly behind there, but felt we could catch up. And then after that, kind of COVID hit, and just the cost of material and labor, everything went way up, making it not feasible to stay on that path.
So when you say that, what has the company done to address some of those issues that arose after COVID, like the supply chain or just the scarcity of materials?
Yeah, so I wasn't really involved in a lot of those decisions or discussions. Witness Dave Roy was here at that time and was part of those discussions.
Has the company revised, I mean, I know that you all have attempted to put a timeline towards finishing the replacements. Have you all attempted to revise the project plan itself in order to maybe speed that up a little bit?
I mean, the way we identify projects is really based on risk. We can move some, but we've gotten a lot of footage out already. But modifying the project plans, I don't think would get us where we need to be.
Do you all work with any, I know, like Kentucky American Water works with the city, and I know that you all do have some areas that are more densely populated than others. do you all work with any municipalities, or jurisdictions in order to maybe reprioritize some of those particular projects?
We will do that if, let's say, a municipality has a plan to pave a certain street. It may not have been the project we want to throw up front, but we'll move that in order to be more economical in how we do it.
Do you have any system in place now to, or like a particular team of people who communicate with some of those entities in order to facilitate the communication?
Yes, our construction folks communicate with them constantly, and then we also have public affairs under Linda Rumpke that also does that.
Okay. And I know generally, this is just like a general question, but what is your plan to replace the unprotected bare steel that you all have?
What is the plan?
Mm-hmm.
We identify bare steel and then prioritize it based on risk, whether that's leaks, whether it's environmental issues, whatever. And then we build projects around that. And when we do look at those projects, we look at them from a point of view of how much pipe can we get out. So we may actually join several projects into one in order to get the most pipe retired.
Okay. And I just have one additional question. Are you familiar with the 2023 annual report that Columbia filed? It's basically the annual report. Have you read it?
I have not.
Okay, well, I will go ahead and ask, and you might know just because. In that particular report filed with the PSC and PHMSA, there was some piping identified as the category of other. Do you have any idea what type of piping that would be?
Yeah, so my initial understanding of what that pipe is pipe that's old and we just don't know what it is. There's also an aspect of that pipe that is put in the ground but hasn't been accounted for or put on the books.
When you all go in for some reason to do a project in that area, do you keep track of what type of pipe you all locate? Like if it had been identified as other, does the company track in any way, hey, we went in, this was other, and then we found whatever type of pipe? Do you all keep track of that?
I mean, if we find it where we dig it up and it's different, then we'll identify that, yes.
Okay, and you keep that in your records for inspection purposes?
It'll be documented on the work order, I believe.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Reagan?
I don't have any questions.
Me neither.
I don't either. You did sit there? And this witness may be excused as far as I'm concerned. Unless staff has any objection.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. We're switching counsel.
We are. Our next witness is Tammy Schaefer.
There's a remodeling of the courtroom that's about to take place. Some of the things are marked off with tape, as you may notice, so pretty soon we'll have more room for counsel. And Ms. Schaefer, call your next witness.
We'd like to call Tammy Schaefer, please.
Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And tell us your full name and your business address, please.
Full name's Tammy Schaefer. I go by Tammy. Business address is 290 West Nationwide Boulevard, Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Schaefer. Could I ask your title, please, for the record?
Yes, it's a manager of rate case execution and regulatory for NiSource.
Okay. And could I ask you to please just speak up? And it's just a little bit hard to hear. If you could lean
Yeah,
forward.
apologies, I've got a cold.
It's okay. Okay. Did you cause testimony and responses to be filed in the record of this case?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections or changes to make?
No, I do not.
Okay. Is it your intent to have those testimony and responses incorporated into the record of this hearing?
Yes.
Thank you. The witness is offered for cross.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counsel?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm going to be asking you questions. Some of the questions are for exhibits that have multiple sponsors, so if there's a more appropriate witness to answer the question, please just let me know.
Okay.
I'm going to start by looking at Columbia, Kentucky's response to the Attorney General's first request, item 147, attachment A.
I don't think I have that one in my binder.
Okay. I have the response. Okay.
Yes.
And if it helps, I'm going to look at attachment A and attachment B from that same.
You said 147A, attachment A and B?
Yes.
I have attachment A open in front of me.
Okay. And I think if you could get attachment B as well, because I think it's.
Yes, they
okay.
both are. Yes,
Perfect.
I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay. Okay, so for the lease of buildings and land that Columbia, Kentucky has a total adjusted value of $804,306, with $588,045 being associated with the Nationwide building. Is that correct? I think that would be in attachment B.
Yeah, I'm finding that. Thank you. Can you repeat the number for me again, please?
Oh, sure. So it's 804,306 is the total adjusted amount, correct?
That is the total for the buildings and land. There is another amount in that same attachment that's further down on line 51 for leases other. So the total on line 52 in that attachment for total rents and leases is $876,506.
Okay. And in the forecasted test period, 588,045 is associated with the Nationwide Boulevard building, correct?
Yes, that's what I see here on the schedule. That's correct.
So that would leave approximately 216,000 for all other leases of building and land. Is that correct? Outside of the Nationwide building.
Correct. For buildings, leases, land, and other leases allocated to Columbia Gas of Kentucky by NiSource Corporate Services Company.
And then when you compare the 216,000 to the value of all leases of building and land, other than the corporate office value in 2023 of approximately 125,000, it appears that the company is requesting an increase of over 91,000. Is that correct?
Based on the numbers that are in front of me, yes, it appears the most recent 2023 actual is 570,000 for the Nationwide building, to the 588 and the, pardon me, 2023 actual for total was 809, almost 810,000 to the 876. So yes, there is an increase in the rents and leases from 23 to 25.
And can you explain what is driving that increase?
Most of the increase in typically, and this is a generalization, an increase in rents and leases would be per increase in the lease agreements for each of those facilities.
And
So
do
it
you
could be
believe that would...
increase in the actual rent premium and interest payment for each of those facilities.
Do you believe that, to the best of your knowledge, that would also apply to this case?
Yes, it should, to the best of my knowledge.
Do you know if Columbia, Kentucky anticipates new leases in the future that have not been captured in the historical periods?
Can you repeat the question,
Sure.
please?
Do you know Columbia, Kentucky anticipates new leases in the future that have not been captured by the historical test period?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm also not but I also don't prepare the budget. So that would be best also be answered by probably Nick Blye and Craig Insco. Nick Blye for the NiSource Corporate Services rents and leases that you're asking here.
Okay. And in terms of the Nationwide building, do you know what the total cost for that building is for NiSource?
I do not off the top of my head, no.
Do you think that could be answered as a post-hearing data request?
Yes, it should be able to be.
And do you know, and this could also be a post-hearing data request if you don't, what would be the explanation for the fluctuations in the cost of the Nationwide building between 2021 and 2023, which appear in attachment B?
Yeah, part of the allocation of costs for the building is based on personnel. So it's based on employees and the employees who are working in a particular facility. Pardon me. In a particular facility like Arena, which in the Nationwide Arena building is actually where I work personally myself. So, pardon me. For example, in my job duties, I work on multiple of the Columbia operating companies in my role. In a given week or day, I may do work on behalf of, say, Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania. Other times I may be working, like I am here today, on Columbia Gas of Kentucky. And that time allocation and the work done and performed on behalf of that operating company is the basis upon which how the lease costs are allocated, is based on the work being performed by the employees who work in that office location. And those building allocation studies are updated annually.
Do you know a specific reason why 2022 would have had a particularly higher cost?
I do not off the top of my head. That is something I would have to take a request to look into to answer.
We can do that as a post-hearing data request. Do you know whether Columbia, Kentucky has any employees that work within that building, the Nationwide building?
I do not recall if there are any Company 32 employees that work at the Arena building, which would be what I call Company 32 would be a Columbia Gas of Kentucky employee. Off the top of my head, that'd be something that we'd have to look into as well.
Oh, we could do that as a post-hearing data request as well. And now I'm going to shift gears, and I'm going to be looking at your rebuttal testimony, pages 2 to 3.
And you, just to clarify, you said my rebuttal, pages 2 and 3?
Yes.
Yeah, you good.
Yes, I believe
Okay, I am ready.
Okay. And you state that the corporate aircraft is an existing resource that would be allocated to Columbia, Kentucky regardless of use. Is that in your testimony?
That is not in my testimony. That'd be the
Mr. Blye,
testimony
I'm
of.
sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. That'd be the testimony of witnesses Cooper and Blye.
Okay. Next, I'm going to be looking at staff's first request, item 13, attachment B. It's pages 15 through 17. I believe will be an updated, update to that. Let me find date. What I'm specifically looking at is invoices for a flight for Mr. Spanos and Mr. Johnson and Miss Nadir. It appears that Mr. Spanos' flight cost was approximately $300 more than the other two. And I was wondering if you happen to know why his cost would have been more expensive than the other two.
I do not have that knowledge, no.
Okay, so, you know, I probably will just go ahead and ask that as a post-hearing data request. Just reviewing my notes. Could you explain why the budgeted amount for the revenue requirement for consulting services is less than the actual amount for 2023? I'm specifically looking at, let's see, staff's first request, item 54. So the base period amount is higher than the forecasted period.
Allison, I think I'll need you, and I have a note in here, Brittany, on 54, it's not in my binder.
Yeah.
It's confidential.
Okay. This is the only question I have. It's very general. Is that okay?
I don't know what it is, so I don't know if it.
Do you think we need to go into confidential record?
I don't believe.
Out of abundance of caution?
Yeah, we can if you
Okay.
want to do it out of abundance of
Yeah,
caution.
let's switch to confidential. Confidential session, so we are back on public record. And council, you may ask.
So can you explain generally, without any discussion of specific numbers, the difference between the base period amount for total O&M expense for professional services and the forecasted test period amount?
The base period would reflect 6 months of actual realized expenses and 6 months of budgeted expenses for those categories. The forecasted period is per the company's budget. I don't, in my role, prepare budget versus actual variance analyses. That would best be a question for either a witness in SCO or witness Blye.
Okay, thank you. I believe that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Reagan? I don't think I have any questions. Commissioner Stacy? Okay, and neither do I. So, you may stand down and be excused.
You said stay around, excuse me?
Stand down and be excused.
Okay, sorry. It's cold, I tell you.
Unless there's redirect.
We do not have any redirect, thank you.
All right.
Our next witness is Beth Owens.
Raise your right hand to be sworn, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury? Please be seated. Tell us your full name and your business address, please.
My name is Elizabeth Owens. My work address is 290 Nationwide Boulevard in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, and what materials have you brought with you?
This is my testimony and the discovery request.
Counsel?
I just have a few questions for you today.
Sorry. I skipped direct. Shut up.
Ms. Owens, what is your, by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by NiSource Incorporated,
Okay, and what is your title there?
Director of Compensation.
And did you provide any testimony or responses to data requests in this proceeding?
Yes.
And do you have any revisions or amendments or anything like that to any of your testimony or data responses?
No.
Okay. And do you, is it your desire to have that testimony and responses to data requests incorporated into the record of this proceeding?
Yes.
And she's available for cross now.
All right, now, staff Jeff.
Good morning. Good morning.
Do any of the non-union employees hold the same or similar positions to union employees?
Yes, some roles are similar between union and non-union employees.
As opposed to your data request, could we provide a comparative salary of wages and benefits for any employees that hold similar positions?
Yes, we can get that together for you.
And now I'm going to look at your direct testimony attachment B05.
Yes.
Could you explain whether these metrics are for the funding or payout of the incentive programs?
Yes, the metrics on that page are what we measure for both the short-term incentive plan and the long-term incentive plan.
That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reagan?
Good morning. Just to follow up on some of the questions I had for Ms. Cooper, can you talk about whether the short-term and profit sharing are one, or is it plus one?
They are two different plans, but when we get to the results, we use the same result figure that we use for the short-term incentive plan, also for the profit sharing.
And is the profit based on only Columbia or all companies?
All companies.
And NiSource as well? So,
Yes.
Okay.
All of these measure corporate level numbers.
this might be confidential, is it an average, if you can answer, or how do you take the company's profits and how is that spread out?
So the design of our incentive plans, we have both financial and non-financial metrics. So we've got customer satisfaction, operational excellence, safety. Those are across the entire company.
Okay.
The financial measures, again, that are in there are also at a corporate level. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. And is performance long-term and short-term in incentives? Is it included in both or one or the other?
Well, both, but a little differently. So our short-term plan measures on a one-year time frame the different metrics that are listed on that scorecard. For the long-term incentive, we give the shares two different ways. One is time on the long-term incentive side. Some of the shares are given as purely time-bound, and then others have used these metrics in the scorecard that reflect the performance of the company, financial and, again, operational excellence, safety, customer satisfaction, that type of thing.
Okay. And are different levels in the organization paid or incentivized differently by their position?
Yes,
Is that fair? Okay. One question I think I should have asked Mrs. Schaefer is the synchronization of interest. Do you know about that?
That is not my area of
Okay,
expertise.
I'll go back and ask it in a follow-up, sorry. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stacy?
Ms. Owens, can you describe what your responsibilities are as Director of Compensation?
Absolutely. So I am responsible for ensuring that the entire company, including our Kentucky employees, are paid a competitive wage for the jobs that they each hold. We also do market research to ensure that we're giving competitive merit increases, pay increases annually, as well as responsible for administering the incentive plans, both short-term incentive and long-term incentive. Those are the biggest duties. We're also involved in lots of other projects and compensation-related work around the company.
And does that include all employees of the company?
Everyone,
Everyone?
yes.
Who do you report to directly?
The Vice President of Total Rewards, Kimberly Cartella.
Does that include her?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ms. Owens, what, if any, changes were made to the profit-sharing components of compensation in this settlement?
Profit sharing with the settlement, I wasn't privy to the settlement discussions, so that would be a better witness for one of the other folks.
You're not aware of any changes to the profit-sharing going forward?
No.
Other questions I have? Moving right along, she may redirect.
Oh, I don't believe we have any redirect, and may she be excused for the day?
Thank you.
Do you want to recall Ms. Schaefer? She can speak to interest synchronization if you'd like her to testify on that.
You sure do.
I can just ask it, and, yeah, that's fine.
Thanks for the offer.
Thank you.
All right.
Then we would next call Mr. Nick Blye.
Raise your right hand to be sworn, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
And tell us your full name and your business address, please.
Nick Blye, 290 West Nationwide Boulevard, Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you. And Mr. Blye, by whom are you employed?
NiSource Shared Service Company.
Okay. And what is your job title?
Manager of NCSC Accounting.
Okay. And in this proceeding, did you cause any testimony or responses to data requests that were filed?
I did.
Okay. And do you have any revisions, amendments, or any edits that you need to do to any of those, any of your testimony or data request responses?
So we did identify the attachment to my testimony was incorrect and filed a amendment or revision on October 18th.
And that was filed into the record last Friday. And with that amendment that was filed, do you adopt that testimony and responses to data requests?
I do.
And is it your desire to have those incorporated into the record of this proceeding?
It is.
And then Mr. Blye is available for cross.
Counsel,
Good morning, how are you?
Doing okay.
Okay, there's a few questions that were kicked to you, so I'll start there. So I'm looking at staff's first request, item 11. Columbia was supposed to identify an allocation factor for each account as well as the allocated amount. They did not provide the factor, the allocation factor percentage was not provided. It was only the billed amount. According to the contract with Atrium Economics, NiSource did obtain a cost of service study related to allocation, and Columbia should have been able to obtain the appropriate percentage to be allocated. Could you explain why Columbia did not provide this information in response to this request?
Yeah, so I believe it was provided as a standard filing requirement, 16.7U.
Thank you. Now I'm going to be looking at your rebuttal testimony at 2 to 3. You state that the corporate aircraft is an existing resource that would be allocated to Columbia, Kentucky regardless of use. Could you explain how corporate aircraft costs are allocated to Columbia, Kentucky, and whether the costs in the forecasted test period are directly related to the provision of service in Kentucky?
So the corporate aircraft is allocated similar to a lot of other costs. So NCSC is regulated by the FERC, and that provides a framework for us to allocate to the companies in proportion to the services received. And there's a number of bases that can be utilized, gross fixed assets by company, employee count by company, et cetera. And for the corporate aviation costs in particular, as Witness Cooper explained, most of the passengers are, the work they're doing is benefiting all companies. And so the allocation that would be chosen would be one that would be similarly benefiting all companies and allocated to all companies.
I'm going to still be looking at your rebuttal testimony, but asking about a different part. It's on pages 7 to 10. Could you explain how Columbia, Kentucky forecasts contract labor in the forecasted test period?
You said rebuttal?
Yes.
Pages 7 to 10.
Yes.
Yeah, so contract labor, the starting point would be to ground it in historical actuals. But one of the things that we make sure of when we're doing budgeting is that if the resource is budgeted internally, meaning it's headcount, we don't want people to duplicate that in contract labor. So I don't know if that answers your question, but typically a functional leader is going to want to see their entire organization as if they had to staff it with actual personnel, but that's not always the case. So typically there's going to be vacancies, and that work will have to be supplemented with contract labor.
And could you explain whether direct and allocated labor are the only labor pools for Kentucky? Columbia, Kentucky.
I think so. I'm not quite sure of the
Do you know if
question you're
there's
asking.
someone else that might be able to speak better to that?
No, I think the answer is yes. Yeah, the only two ways we can allocate labor to Kentucky is by directly charging it or through one of our billing pools, which would split it amongst all of our companies.
You heard me ask, or did you hear me ask Witness Schaefer about whether Columbia, Kentucky anticipates new leases in the future that haven't been captured in the historical test period?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an answer to that question?
From a budgeting perspective, that would be based on historical trend. As a business question, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. And then there was a question about Columbia's first response to staff's first request, item 54, attachment A, about the forecasted test period amount for professional services being less than the base period amount. And I was wondering if you could explain what factors went into that forecasted amount. Or put another way, what drove that decrease for the forecasted test period?
Can I see that schedule?
Matt, show me this.
Which line were you looking at and which tab?
I'm looking at line 3.
I think she said line 3.
Oh, yeah, line 3, I'm
Line
sorry.
3, sorry.
Yeah, from looking at that, I'm not sure we can provide that in a post-hearing data request. Generally speaking, sometimes the way the base period is not an exact calendar year can create some lack of comparability to the forecast period, and then it, again, generally what I described earlier for the way we would supplement vacancies could be factoring in here, but we can provide that in a post-hearing data
That
request.
sounds good, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I guess I just had one follow-up to Ms. Hatcher's questions about the allocation. You mentioned that they were filed as an initial filing requirement. Is that correct?
Correct.
However, I guess I don't want to get too technical, but isn't it true, and I think if you didn't say it, one of the other witnesses has, that you all have a specific cost allocation study done every year? Is that correct?
Twice a year.
Oh, okay, so NiSource has one done twice a year about what expenses should be allocated to which Columbia entity, or all of its entities.
So the allocation survey is updated twice per year, and it updates the allocation. So let's say a particular allocation allocated 20% to Kentucky. When we update it again based on the statistical information that drives that basis, and AKA allocation pool, that could change to maybe 21%.
Okay, so, based on the information there and your initial filing requirement, which you would agree with me is like a generalized, here's your basis one, but in just like a generalized statement with maybe like most of them have some sort of percentage, some of them don't. And then you go back and you look at the the response to staff's item 11 in the first DR. There isn't really a way, and maybe if there is, you can explain, there really isn't a way for someone looking at that document to know what the 50% is, for example, of any one particular category. Correct? Like what you've got in the little chart, there's no way to use that particular piece of information to figure out the allocation or figure out what was there generally.
Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at. So you were envisioning something more maybe by account and then by billing pool to show.
Basically, yes, some way to verify the numbers. Because as they're provided right now, you would agree you can't really verify that the costs are being allocated correctly because we don't have anything to compare them to. Like, we don't know 50% of what, I guess, unless we went and specifically tried to find that item in a schedule, correct? And even then, it wouldn't give us the context that your descriptors for the allocation factors requires.
So what you're requesting could be provided. I don't think it would give you, I don't think it would give you any more comfort than other things that have been filed that they're accurate. I think the allocation survey is actually filed. Let me look. So staff's data request set 3, number 11.
And would that reflect, I'll go while I'm looking for that, would that reflect the most recent cost of service study done by NiSource with regard to allocation of different costs?
When you say most recent,
Like,
I'm not sure if it was most recent. I could provide in a post-hearing data request if this was based on 2023 actuals or if it was a certain allocation survey.
I guess if we asked it in a different way, would you be able to provide what it sounds like I'm asking for in a
Yes.
post-hearing data
Yes.
request?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
That was artful.
Yeah. Mr. Hayes, just a couple questions. Can you talk about how your budget process in general, how you work through that 2 times a year? Or how you set budgets and then the cost allocation?
So the budgeting process typically is once a year. That I don't want that to be confused with the allocation survey, which I mentioned is twice a year. So the budgeting process is typically once a year. It starts with high level numbers. So NiSource Inc., the parent company, has to meet certain financial commitments. There's only so much we can afford in terms of O&M spend. So each functional leader will be given a target, and then the role of budgeting is to hold discussions with each of the functional leaders, understand what their needs are, make sure we're reflecting a fully staffed organization, and then there's negotiations that happen to try to meet in the middle on what the right budget is for functional leader.
So the president of Columbia for Kentucky has the ability to negotiate if they don't agree?
Yeah.
And you budget at full staff, but I think in the previous discussion, you were talking about the cost allocation between contract labor and full-time?
Mm-hmm.
And so they were, the president of that entity would look at that and assume that all are staffed?
So I don't want to speak too much about the president's budget because that would be outside of NiSource Corporate Shared Services, but if we take the accounting department as an example, so the chief accounting officer knows that they need a manager of SEC reporting, they need a manager of NiSource Corporate Shared Services, and then we all have staff, so they know what their organization needs to be. If there are vacancies during the year, that work still needs to be completed. And so we can and do offset the vacancies with temporary labor, contract labor.
And that's what I was gonna ask, are they temporary or short, 6 months, a year on average, or is it just temp work?
I'm not sure what the structure would be.
Okay.
Maybe a better question for Ms. Owen.
I think that's all I have, thank you.
Commissioner Stacy?
I don't necessarily have a question, but are you Beth Owens' supervisor?
No.
And who, Ms. Owens, who did you say that was? Oh, is she not here? Can you tell me who that is?
Kimberly Cartella was who she said her.
Oh, okay.
She's not a witness.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Blye, I'm looking at your rebuttal testimony, pages 3 and 4, where you're talking about the Attorney General's recommendations for corporate jet travel expenses. As you may know, it's not super popular with ratepayers to pay for jet travel. And, let's see, you had said in your rebuttal that your company does not necessarily compare the prices of commercial flight prices. And you gave several justifications for the reasons why there may be value in taking a corporate jet. A lot of those are not easily quantifiable, privacy, access to Wi-Fi, things like that. But one of them is that there's time, the value of time associated with waiting in airports for flights and delays and things like that. So the people who are generally flying on the corporate jets, are those hourly or salaried employees?
I would say generally salary.
Right. Are you sometimes transporting people who you're paying hourly, experts, or?
I don't know.
As a rule, they'd be salaried. Okay. And then the settlement stipulation did either remove or decrease some of that jet travel. Are you familiar with the details?
Enough that I don't believe there was any adjustment for aviation.
Okay, there was not. And that's all the questions that I have. Redirect?
No, no ma'am.
Okay. And as far as I'm concerned, he can be excused unless anybody else still needs him? Okay. Thank you. All right. By my count, there are 3 witnesses left for Columbia and 1 for the Attorney General's office.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's try to get 1 more in before we take a quick lunch break then.
Yes, ma'am. And then we would call Ms. Wozniak.
Raise your right hand to be sworn, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and complete to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please have a seat. Tell us your full name and your business address.
My name is Julie Wozniak. My business address is 290 West Nationwide Boulevard, Columbus, Ohio.
All right, Councilman Mass.
Thank you. And Ms. Wozniak, by whom are you employed?
I am employed by NiSource Corporate Services Company.
Okay. And what is your title there?
I am Manager of Regulatory Studies.
And in this proceeding, have you caused any testimony or responses to data requests to be filed?
I have.
And do you have any revisions, amendments, or edits to any of that previously filed testimony or data request responses?
I do not.
And is it your anticipation that those will be adopted into this the record of this proceeding?
It is.
And she is available for cross-examination.
Steph?
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning, I'm fine, thanks.
So I'm gonna be looking at Schedule D-2.3. It's Schedule D.
D.
2.3.
Okay, D.
That's,
2.3.
sorry. What, in what piece of testimony?
Let's see. It was part of the application.
Okay.
I'm looking for the specific tab, I'm sorry. Okay, it's on, let's see, volume 8, and it's PDF page 230.
I need it in front of me. It's where I'm a joint respondent?
Yes.
Is that, okay, thank you.
Is it page 230?
Yeah. Yeah, 230 is the first sheet, and I'll be looking at the second sheet, which is 231.
Okay.
So, for adjustment 3 on page 2 of 2, could you confirm that the adjustment for gas costs are made to reflect the amounts shown as an operating expense?
Sorry, you're on adjustment 3. Is it could you repeat the question for me?
Sure. For those adjustments for gas costs for adjustment 3, are those made to reflect amounts shown as an operating expense?
Yes, I believe so. This is the normalization entry.
And I'm gonna, if you just wanna go up to the first sheet on page 230. And I'm gonna be looking at adjustments 1 through 3.
Okay.
It appears that there's an approximately 9.1 million adjustment subject to check for a change in billing determinants for residential, commercial, industrial, other sales, and public utilities. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what line are you on?
It's for the adjustments 1 through 3.
So you've added them together?
Yes.
Subject to check. That looks an approximation, yes.
Okay. Could you explain what the driving factor is for that change to billing determinants?
So, the billing determinants, it's the change from the base period to the budgeted forecast period. And we go. Sorry. And it's by class. Let me see. Can I get to schedule D1? B in here? Is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's the adjustment of the billing determinants.
And what's the driving factor for that
Oh, the
change?
decrease?
Yes.
Change in the number of bills that were calculated.
That was the change in the number of bills that were calculated?
I'm sorry, the change in the number of billing determinants, so which bills are a part of.
And could you give some examples of some of those changes?
If customers, depending upon the rate schedule, change rate schedules between period, they would move based on their consumption to a different rate schedule. That would be one type of adjustment.
Since it seems to be throughout the entire, all of customer classes, would there be other factors besides the one you mentioned?
Yes, that would.
And do you happen to know what those factors would be, or do you think that might be a better post-hearing data request?
It could be a post-hearing data request.
Okay, I'll ask that as a post-hearing data request. And then do you know whether the change to billing determinants has any effect on revenue?
Yes, obviously, it would be a part of the calculation.
Thank you, and that's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Lee? Commissioner Stacy? No. And I don't have any questions either. Redirect?
We don't have any no redirect, but may she be excused?
Yes. All right, so, pretty good timing for a lunch break. I think let's try to just do 1 hour. Give everybody a chance just to get some food, and then we'll take up those last 3 witnesses, and
Your Honor,
hopefully.
could I add something before we go off the record?
Absolutely.
Witness Insco, we don't have any questions for. We just wanted to make sure he was available because he sponsored some of the data requests. So we're fine with him being excused if everyone else is fine with him being excused.
Anybody have any objection to that? And in that case, with only 2 witnesses to go, maybe if everybody can stand it, we'll just motor through? And not- Candace, we know who really runs this place. It's Candace. You're the one who really runs this place. I think that's a short break. Let's do it. Let's do it. Unless anybody wants to request. All right, let's do that. Next witness, please.
We'd like to call Mike Jata to the stand, please.
And Jata is the correct pronunciation? Jata. All right, raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury? All right, please have a seat. Tell us your full name and your business address.
My name is Mike Garata, and I work at 290 West Nationwide Boulevard in Columbus, Ohio.
Counsel.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your title for the record, please?
I'm Manager of Financial Planning and Analysis.
Okay. Did you cause testimony and responses to be filed into the record of this case?
I did.
Do you have any changes to those?
I do not.
Okay. Is it your intent to have those incorporated into the record of this hearing today?
Yes.
Thank you. The witness is available for cross.
Counsel.
Good morning, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Do you know whether Columbia has considered performing a weather normalization study based on a shorter time period?
Currently, we use the 20 years of normal. We look at this periodically, but as of right now, 20 years is our assumption as the most accurate way to predict future weather.
And has Columbia thought about the possibility in future rate cases of doing a shorter period of 10 to 12 years?
We've considered it, and we do look at that when we do rate case proceedings, and we decided on 20 currently.
And what are the current considerations that you've been thinking about when shortening the period?
Again, nothing really specific causes us to look at that, except just looking at our processes from time to time again, making sure we're doing everything to the most appropriate way to predict our usage.
Would it be difficult to change that procedure for weather normalization, or would that just be a matter of deciding?
When you say change,
If you were to change the weather normalization study from 20 years to 10 to 12 years, would that be more difficult to perform?
No.
And I'm going to switch gears here. Were you here for the questions directed to Ms. Cooper regarding bypass?
Yes.
Did you agree with her statements?
Can you be more specific on the statements?
Do you agree with her statements regarding the definitions of bypass, as well as, I want to make sure I get everything that she answered. Definition of bypass is currently that Columbia, Kentucky is not utilizing any type of, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Let's see. In terms of the customers within the last 10 years leaving a service due to traditional bypass or anything like that.
That's not the area I focus on, so I would
Okay.
defer to Judy for anything she feels in that matter.
Okay, if you could, as necessary, refer to Columbia, Kentucky's response to this commission staff's third request for information, item 26A. The response given is under confidential protection, but there's no need to refer to any actual names. But before we go into that, does anyone have an objection with general questions? It relates to a single large transportation customer.
Is it okay with that?
Yes, we don't say the name.
Someone object quickly and loudly if we cross over into anything confidential.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
And do you have what I talked about pulled up?
I do not.
Okay.
327, you said?
Item 26A and third request for information.
Have it, Ms. Koenig.
Yeah, I have it here.
Again, not referring to any specific names, can you confirm whether the single large transportation customer is physically connected to the competing pipeline reference in the response?
I do not know specifically if they are. It's my understanding that they are served by both of these pipelines.
And do you know if it's a direct connection, or would infrastructure need to be built to connect this customer?
I don't have those details.
Okay, and I'll ask that as post-hearing data request. And can you provide an update on the status of the customer and describe the most up-to-date communication between Columbia and the industrial customer in regards to possible bypass and forecasted usage?
I don't have those discussions personally. That'd be
Okay.
somebody else.
So I'll ask that as a post-hearing data request. And do you know, to the best of your ability, an estimate on the distance of nearby lines that could cause a traditional bypass in Columbia for this customer?
I do not.
Do you know who would know?
I do not, but if that's submitted as a data request, I'm sure we could
Okay.
find the right person.
I think for the rest of the questions related to that, I'll just follow them up with a post-hearing data request. I believe that is all the questions that I have for you. Thank you.
Ms. Schrader.
Just one quick question. I know you're using the 20 years, as the weather has intensified. Do you think you'll make the move to do a shorter period of time?
I don't know what we will do moving forward. I do know that we will test it every time we do this to see if anything is more appropriate. But as of right now, I can't say if we will for sure change anything one way or another.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stacy?
If you were to change, would a shorter period of time be more accurate than the current period of time that you're testing?
Again, I would need to run both to see which is more accurate for this service territory. I know widely considered fewer years, you capture more recent history, not weighed down by previous history. Historically, as weather has not trended one way or the other, a 20 or a 30 year was appropriate. Again, before I can say definitively if one would be more accurate than the other, I would need to run both of those analyses and see which is better.
Is it safe to say that if you excluded the history that's further back in time, that current weather patterns might be more, that might be a,
That is safe to assume, yes.
okay, thank you.
And Mr. Garada, has your position changed since you gave testimony?
No, there
It
has
may
been,
just be inaccurate on my memo here.
there's been some shifting of job titles to clean up within our department, but no. The responsibilities I had when filing this testimony around demand forecasting, I still have today.
Okay, and title stayed the same as well?
I think when we submitted this, I might have been manager demand forecasting, and now
That's
it's
what I had.
manager financial planning analysis, but the responsibilities are the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all the questions I had. Redirect. Ms. Kerr.
We have no redirect, thank you.
All right, and you may step down and be excused as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Final witness, I believe, for,
He was online and Ensco was,
Yeah, he was.
was dismissed. It's our last witness. We don't have it.
We don't have
The Attorney General's witness
Attorney
online.
General's witness.
The other one. Thank you.
The Attorney General calls Mr. John DeFever to the virtual stand.
Okay, let's see if we can make that happen.
Okay.
Do you know if he's waiting online?
He is waiting, yes, he's been on, logged in since before the hearing started.
See me or hear me?
Yes.
We can see you. Can you hear us, Mr. DeFever?
Yes.
Excellent. Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay, please tell us your full name and your business address for the record.
It's John DeFever, 15728 Farmington Road, Livonia, Michigan.
All right. Counsel, you may ask.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. DeFever, what is your occupation?
A senior regulatory consultant.
And did you cause direct testimony to be filed in this case?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any additions or corrections to that testimony?
Only what appears in my errata.
And was that errata filed with the commission on October 14th, 2024?
Yes.
Can you please walk through the changes that were made in that errata filing?
Yes. In my schedules and my testimony, I overlooked making an adjustment for interest synchronization. In my revised schedules, I added a schedule for interest synchronization. This schedule impacts my testimony on pages 2, 3, 4, 34, and 35, and also impacts my A and C schedules on Exhibit JD1. The impact on my recommended revenue requirement is an increase of $122,114.
Can you hear him?
Oh, Mr. DeFever, could you speak up or sit a little closer to the microphone, please?
Is this better?
Much better.
I believe so.
Okay.
Chair, does Mr. DeFever need to repeat anything that he just said for you all, or?
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay. Mr. DeFever, let's walk through the errata filing again, please.
Okay. In my schedules and my testimony, I overlooked making an adjustment for interest synchronization. In my revised schedules, I added a schedule for interest synchronization. This schedule impacts my testimony on pages 2, 3, 4, 34, and 35, and also impacts my A and C schedules on Exhibit JD1. The impact on my recommended revenue requirement is an increase of $122,114.
And that was the only correction that you made was to the interest synchronization, correct?
Correct.
And is it your intention to adopt the direct written testimony as your testimony in this matter?
Yes.
Chair, the witness is available for cross-examination.
Thank you. Staff?
I have just a general overall question. I know, Mr. DeFever, you cited to at least one or two other jurisdictions in your testimony. Was there something about those particular jurisdictions that you felt made them applicable to this matter?
No. They're just, ones that I was familiar with.
Okay, so more based on your experience is why you
Yeah.
cited to those, okay.
Correct.
I had one other question. Refer, if you could, to the settlement attachment A. If you have that, do you have that available?
Yes.
Okay. And then your testimony at page 21, lines 14 and 15. And I don't think your proposed adjustments to Columbia's short-term and long-term incentive programs don't match the adjustments shown on the settlement attachment. Do you have any idea why that might be so?
Let me look. I think because line 11 includes short-term incentive comp and profit sharing on the attachment A.
Okay,
That might
so,
be, I haven't done the math, but that could be why.
okay, so math check pending. You believe that might be why?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Reagan?
Maybe you can answer the interest synchronization. Seeing as it wasn't included in the first round, is interest synchronization a concept or an applied regulatory, kind of, I guess, for accounting practice?
It's an actual impact that's made from our adjustments. When we make adjustments to rate base, it affects the level of interest. So, and then that level of interest affects the income taxes. So the interest sync really shows the impact on taxes from our rate base adjustments.
It shows the impact on what?
Taxes.
On income taxes.
Do all rate-making entities use that?
I don't know that they all do. We always do. That's why there was just an oversight in this case.
Okay.
And if there's a rate base adjustment, we generally have that.
And as a consultant, I'm assuming that you've worked on other projects. So you're saying you would use that same principle in other?
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Stacy?
Mr. DeFever, were there any other adjustments that were made, that you yourself made prior to any of this being submitted?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Prior to what?
Well, prior to this final report that we're referencing to about the interest synchronization, were there any other changes that you're aware of that were made along those lines?
Are you talking in the settlement agreement or
Yes.
just to my testimony?
Yes.
It looks like in the settlement agreement, all of my original adjustments are listed.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. It appears that in the settlement agreement, my original adjustments are listed. So there aren't any that were left off. There's some that, because due to the agreement, aren't accepted, but they all do appear to be there.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Stacy?
That's
Yeah?
yeah, sort of.
Follow up if you need to.
No, I'm not going to.
Okay. Go ahead.
I guess, just to be clear, is it an accepted regulatory rate-making practice? Interest, what's it? No, synchronization.
Oh, it absolutely is. I've been
Okay.
doing this for a long time, and it's part of almost every case.
Okay, I've just never heard of it, so I'm just, okay, thank you.
All right. And Mr. DeFever, of the $9 million or so of adjustments that you recommended, nearly all of them have ended up in the stipulation, is that right? As far as you know?
Right. I'm not saying that they're all agreed to, but they're all represented.
Okay. All right. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking, but I couldn't hear his last part of his answer there.
I think when you look down at your
Yes,
notes, that
exactly.
you're looking away from the microphone is maybe the issue.
I apologize. I'm
No,
new to
and
these.
it's part of the price for the convenience of having online availability, is that sometimes we lose just a little bit in translation, but that's all the questions that I have. Did we have redirect? No? No follow-up from staff?
No redirect. Chair.
I'm looking at, yeah.
That's okay.
so this doesn't go any shorter, and I don't go any taller. All right, that, I believe, then concludes the evidence that we're submitting. Does anyone feel a need to recall either of the two witnesses that I did not excuse, Ms. Cooper and Ms. Cole? No? All right, now you're excused. Appreciate you sticking around. I didn't track any exhibits that we need to admit. And do we have any other motions at this time?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. Staff, when can you have your post-hearing data requests out? 25th? Is that possible?
Is that Friday?
Mm-hmm.
Good Friday.
Is that okay? All right. And if they have their post-hearing data requests out by this Friday, the 25th, how long will parties need to respond?
Can we have 2 weeks?
Yeah, November 15th, would that do? That's,
Yeah.
yeah? That's a little over 2 weeks? Okay. And then our final order is due March 23rd of 2025. Suspension date is January 1st, 2025. If parties want to submit a brief, which I don't even know if we'll need to with the stipulation, then does staff have a schedule to recommend? Simultaneous?
I mean, I'll defer to them, but if they would like to briefs, that's generally how we would like them done.
Simultaneous initial brief by November 13th? Probably not if we're not
Yeah,
doing
it's
the
usually after the.
responses until the 15th. I would say November 20th for initial brief. Doable?
Yeah.
Okay. And then response briefs, so what day is Thanksgiving?
28th.
I would say, let's see. I had the 26th, but we need to extend that probably just a little. Based on, let's see. Friday the 29th, is that possible?
A holiday still.
Oh,
Could we
yeah,
do the
that's
4th
Friday
or
the 20th.
6th?
Yep.
Maybe the next week.
What'd you say, Friday the 6th of December?
Yeah, Friday
Okay.
the 6th of December.
All right. Is that okay with everyone? December 6th for simultaneous response briefs?
Yeah.
Yes. That's fine.
If we're even doing them? Okay.
And then we can get post-hearing data request responses done sooner, we'll submit them, like when we get them finished, so
Thanks.
that you know that.
Great.
Yes.
And then final order, March 23rd.
Maybe some March 23rd, 25, is that what you're saying, Chair?
That says 10 month, is that the 10 month?
You think that's incorrect?
The suspension date is in January, it's January first.
Yeah, the suspension date is January.
Mhm. Yeah, I said that a minute ago, but then I had March 23rd for the final.
Yes.
Yeah? If that's not accurate, let's deal with it right now.
I think you're correct. I just think maybe that's a Sunday, the
Yeah.
23rd, but I think that's still your 10 months. So it would be that Friday before.
And our practices, our
Monday after.
practice has typically been the Friday before.
Yes.
Although, I don't know that that's ever been litigated. All right. Anything else? Anything further? If not, I'm about to use my gavel. All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.